Everyone has a story. They just don't always have a place to share it. Welcome to I Need Blue, the podcast about to take you on an extraordinary journey where profound narratives come to life, one captivating episode at a time. I'm your host, Jennifer Lee, and I founded this podcast because I know there is healing in sharing. Each story you will hear shared on this podcast is a testament to our collective strength, innate ability to transform, and the incredible power of healing. Please remember, you are never alone. Please visit and share my website with those seeking connection and inspiration. www.ineedblue.net. Thank you, Shargood, for composing and performing the introduction medley for I Need Blue. You can find information about Shar on her website, www.shargood.com. Before starting today's episode, I must provide a trigger warning. I Need Blue features graphic themes, including but not limited to violence, abuse, and murder, and may not be suitable for all listeners. Please take care of yourself and don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it. Now let's get started with today's story. October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. It is a time to honor and remember the lives of babies who were lost too soon, and to stand in solidarity with the 1 in 4 families whose hearts are forever changed by the devastating loss of a child during pregnancy, at birth, or in infancy. On October 15th, we observe Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day, a day to promote greater awareness, offer support, and ensure that no one grieves in silence. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by someone courageous. Thanks to Jessica from the Indian River Healthy Start Coalition, I was connected to Hayley, a mother who, though shattered by unimaginable loss, has found a voice to help others navigate the darkness she has walked through herself. It's a darkness that can reappear at a moment's notice. Hayley's story is one of heartbreak and strength. She and I met over coffee, and as she shared the details of her journey, I couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. In 2022, Hayley had a picture-perfect pregnancy. She delivered a healthy baby boy, Lincoln, and after leaving the hospital, took him to his first pediatrician visit. He had lost a little weight, and there were a few signs that something wasn't quite right. But after a thorough checkup, Hayley was reassured by the doctors, leaving the office thinking everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine. Within days, the symptoms worsened, and Hayley rushed Lincoln to the hospital. The terror of those moments still linger in her voice as she recounts the unimaginable heartbreak of leaving that hospital with an empty car seat. The pain of losing a child is beyond words, but what I want you to hear today is not just the sorrow in Hayley's story, but the profound courage that radiates from her. Amidst the devastation, tears, and the overwhelming grief, Hayley found strength in her family, her friends, and her unbreakable love for Lincoln. In the wake of her loss, Hayley has found purpose. She turned her grief into action, helping other parents who walk the same painful path. She is a beacon of light for those lost in the darkness, offering support and hope to others amid their pain. I'm beyond honored to have you here, Hayley. Thank you for trusting me with your story and giving so much of yourself to help others. Welcome to the I Need Blue podcast.
Hey, thank you. I'm very happy to be here today. I am very thankful that you do what you do so people like us can share our stories, because there's definitely a lot to be talked about in a lot of different situations.
Absolutely. And even though my podcast started with me sharing my story, my podcast would not live if it was not for courageous individuals like you wanted to share their story, be a part of the community, let others know they're not alone. My gratitude goes to you
Thank you.
as a mom myself. We wanted to start out talking about pregnancy because that is so exciting. Tell me about your experience.
Lincoln's dad knew that I was pregnant way before I knew, and we had bickered back and forth. He's like, "You're pregnant. I know you are. Your skin looks great. I know you are. Go get a test." So we had done that for about 2 weeks. And then I took my pregnancy test and I texted him and I said, "You better sit down." And he was like, "Let me guess, you're pregnant." And from that moment, I didn't know how far along I was. I didn't know any of that stuff. I felt that instant connection, that instant bond. It's like, okay, all right, this is really, really scary. And I have no clue what I'm going to do, but this is also really, really exciting. And I also still have no clue what I'm going to do, but we're going to get through it. The beginning of my pregnancy was a little bit of a rough time for me. I was on some medications that I had to come off of. That was a little bit difficult. But other than that, my pregnancy was normal. Every time I went to the doctor, they said his heartbeat was great. Everything looked good. NSTs were great. And the only thing I can think of that was like abnormal per se during my pregnancy was gestational diabetes. And I had gotten COVID around 20 weeks, but I just had to, towards the end of my pregnancy, I just had to come in a little bit more frequently than I would have, which was no issues. Again, the dog, it was for non-stress tests. The doctor said, his heartbeat sounds great. It's beautiful. Love it. Perfect. Good to go. And then, I remember doing ultrasounds, and that was like my all-time favorite, seeing that little body roll around. And I was 8 weeks, the first ultrasound that I got, and he looked like this little gummy bear. That's what we called him. Looked like a little gummy bear in there. I actually opted to do the genetic testing because I could not wait till 20 weeks to find out if I was having a boy or a girl. Obviously, I wanted to make sure all the other risks were taken care of too. But as soon as I found out he was a boy, that whole bond, it changed. It was different. Like I felt that when I first realized I was pregnant, but when I found out he was a boy, it just solidified the connection, I guess.
I'm a boy mom too, so I get it.
Yeah.
Right now, everything is normal.
So I had Lincoln December 8th, 2022. I delivered him at Cleveland Clinic, Indian River up in Vero. My delivery is pretty normal. I mean, I had the epidural, had a normal laboring process, as normal as you can say those are. But one thing that did happen when he was born, I mean, our family is in the room. My mom's here, his dad's there, his other grandma's there. So many people are in the room too. Other people, the whole team is in the room. It was a good experience at the hospital the entire time until we found out that it wasn't later on. When I had Lincoln, though, kind of like got stuck a little bit. But then when I started to push, and when he came out, there was a lot of meconium everywhere. For people who aren't moms, that's like the first poop that babies have, and it's very, very toxic for them. So there was a lot of that present during birth. It was all over him. It was all over me. It was all over the midwife. His dad's mom saw and mentioned it, and one of the nurses had said something back to her about it, but nothing. I mean, they suctioned him with the little boogie suction, no deep suction or anything that we noticed. They kind of had to flip him on his belly and rub his back a little bit at first, and that was kind of scary. But he cried immediately after they did that. They put him on my belly. We did skin to skin, all of that. awesomeness, and then they weighed him. He was 8 pounds, 1 ounce, and 21 inches long. He was big. I will tell you that much. He was big. My mom was taking pictures. They were doing his footprints. And when they were done with that, I got to hold him again. And, I just got to relax a little bit. I knew I wasn't going to fall asleep anytime soon, but I was tired. It's a big process, and I wasn't entirely prepared for it as I thought that I was. But while we were at the hospital, we started to notice for his breathing. He was he's breathing very fast. But we had asked a couple of the doctors and the lactation consultants, hey, we noticed this with his breathing. Is that normal? And every response that we got was yeah, that it's pretty normal. Birth is traumatic for babies too. So they've been living inside of this sac for so long. Now they're out in the world. So they're trying to learn how they're supposed to, adapt to that. So, okay. And then they told us that we could have gone home after one day, but I was actually struggling to breastfeed. So they said we could stay another day, and I opted to do that because I wanted all the support that I could get. That breastfeeding was a difficult thing for me. I struggled to get him to latch.
One day is not a lot of time.
No, and it's like, that's my first baby. My family was here. I had all the support, but I was still really freaked out.
And I love that you self-advocated for yourself to say, no, I really would like to continue my stay.
Right. Yeah, no, I need these resources. I need the help. I'm here. Why not take advantage of it?
Yeah. So after the 2 days, everything clears and you head home.
Actually, it's one of my favorite memories. When we left the hospital, his dad was driving and I sat in the back, and I had my head over the side of his car seat, and Tennessee Whiskey by Chris Stapleton came on. Both me and his dad sang that song to him. We were turning right from 37th Street onto Indian River Drive to get to US 1. And we both, that whole ride down to US 1, we were just singing to him. Nuts. I don't know. That's one of my favorite memories. But 2 days in the hospital, we get to go home. It was a Saturday. His older sister comes over. She met him in the hospital, but she came over the day he came home. My mom and dad were here. His dad's family came over. Our whole entire lives had changed in such a short period of time. It was a really surreal feeling to be at my house with a baby. I mean, I had all this stuff up for a month, but it was still, even seeing it every day, coming home with him, it was still oh my God, this is real. But we had a dog and a cat at the time, and both of them loved my belly when I was pregnant. So both of them loved the baby. Immediately, my cat he's a fat orange cat. His name's Butters. I could not keep him out of the bassinet with Lincoln. It was so hard. I would shoo him away, and then I'd wake up and he'd be not close to him, not dangerous or anything, but I'm like, come on, you can't lay there. And Daisy, our dog, she always had her head on my belly. So if we had him laying on the couch, she would go and she'd put her head right up on the couch and just look at him and make sure he was okay. And then she would go lay down right next to where he was. Or, we had one of the little swings, and we'd put him in the swing, and she'd go and she'd put her chin right on the swing and go back and forth with the swing. And then as long as he was okay, she would go lay down. The whole house took to him pretty quickly. It was awesome. We had our first pediatrician appointment 2 days after we came home. So we came home on a Saturday, and our pediatrician appointment was on Monday. And I was so proud of myself because I got that appointment on Friday, and I thought I was going to be scrambling and wasn't going to be able to leave the hospital on Saturday because I didn't have the appointment. and we had brought him to the pediatrician. And one thing that we had noticed in that time was Lincoln was very sleepy, and it was kind of hard to wake him up to get him to eat. We kind of had to tickle him a little bit, get him to wake up and stimulate him to eat. We mentioned that to the doctor. I mean, they weighed him, they did all of his vitals and that stuff. And he did lose a little bit more weight than they were hoping for. So they had asked us to increase the feedings. After they told us that, they told us they had also seen some blue discoloration around his lips, which can mean there isn't enough oxygen flowing through the body. And that's called cyanotic attacks of the newborn. He was diagnosed with that on his first pediatrician visit. But we did bring him back the following day for a weight check, and he had put like 2.5 ounces back on. So they were happy with that, but didn't see the discoloration. So it was dismissed. Okay, we don't see it. So it must be gone. Which it wasn't. So that was Tuesday, and Lincoln's dad had gone back to work because my family was here. My mom would help, she would take him for a little bit so I could take a nap. She could have kept him the whole entire time. It was really helpful to have them there. We had a normal next few days. I mean, I guess as normal as we thought. But I noticed on Friday that he was really kind of cranky and didn't want to move, didn't want to eat, just cranky. And the only time he was settled was if he was being held. I'm like, okay. And then I started to listen to him, and I'm like, okay, his breathing sounds kind of off, and that's also something we asked at the pediatrician office. And we got kind of the same answer, like this stuff is all normal because birth is also traumatic for the babies. They have to learn and adapt and figure out how their little bodies are going to work on their own. They're doctors, they're experts. Like, we're taught to listen to them. So we did, and we thought everything was normal. But then that Friday morning when I heard his breathing was a little bit weird, his dad was at work. So I brought him out of my room and had my mom hold him and listen to him. And she's like, yeah, you know what? He does sound kind of congested. And I'm like, I feel like I should probably take him somewhere. I'm like Googling pediatric urgent cares. One of my neighbors is a retired nurse. So my mom was like, I'm going to go take him across the street and see what she has to say. My neighbor agreed on the same thing. She was like, I think you can definitely hear a little bit of congestion in there or a little wheezing. So I think it's definitely a good idea to get him in somewhere. And I want to say it was like 1:30 at that point in the afternoon. His dad came home from work, and I'm like, look, like we got to take the baby somewhere. Like, he's not feeling well. I don't know what's wrong. And another thing that I had noticed on him was when I changed his diaper, he had, and I thought it was a rash. I had no clue. I've never seen anything like it before, but it was like this blue discoloration. It's called mottling, but it's typically a thing that happens with older people. And that's just like, I guess, blood clots forming, which I had no clue. I called the pediatrician. I told them what I was seeing. I was like, can I get in? Do you guys have an appointment? And again, that was Friday. The pediatrician told me that they couldn't get me in until Tuesday. So that Friday, he was 8 days old. So I'm like trying to Google pediatric urgent cares. And I got so frustrated because I couldn't find anything. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to Lawnwood. We're 5 minutes down the road. We're going to Lawnwood. So we get in the car to go to Lawnwood, and I'm again sitting in the back with him, and I'm looking at him, and we're driving, and I can see the color just draining out of his face. I could see that his lips were getting blue, but I also was like, okay, am I freaking myself out? Am I seeing these things? Is this really happening? Like, because I know if this is what's actually happening, then like this is bad. But we got to the Lawnwood emergency room parking lot. We got him out of the car. And I looked at him again, and his eyes started to roll to the back of his head. And he was like starting to feel limp. I looked at his nail beds, and they were all blue. Mouth was blue. He was pale. His nail beds were blue. And I looked at his dad, and I was like, this isn't good. Like, his nail beds are blue. He's not getting oxygen. Like, this isn't good. And I don't think his dad didn't really understand like the severity of it until we got in there. We stopped at the triage desk, and, I gave them a rundown of what had happened. And I'm like, I think he looks really pale, and I think that something is weird, but this is my first baby. I don't know, and one of the nurses looked at him, and she was like, you're right. He is kind of pale. So they took him out of the car seat. They went to like do his little vitals, and he did not respond to his temperature being checked rectally. And in that moment, that nurse was like, nope, this is a sick baby. Like, we got to go. She didn't even hand him back to us. She took him, and we followed her back to the pediatric ICU. And, they have Lincoln on a little bed, and they're trying to get anything out of him, and they're struggling. So they call the trauma team, and I'm losing it. I'm absolutely losing it, because they're bringing people in and out. They're taking the families that were in that emergency room with us out of that room. The trauma team is flying in, and I'm beside myself. And Lincoln's dad is like, is that for us? And I'm like, yes. Like, this isn't good, but it takes, in those situations, it takes people time to figure out really like what's happening. It's like, it's another surreal moment, just in a completely different way. So the trauma team came, they cut off his clothes. Not sure what it's called, but they inserted a device into his heel, and that helps them get fluids to the baby faster. So they did that, and they still weren't having the results that they were looking for. And we got taken to the pediatric emergency operating room. I want to say it was the operating room. And they have him in, the warmers, and his vitals are all over the place. And, this happened so fast. I can't even begin, and it's like, holy crap, like what is happening?
And you're witnessing all of this? They didn't say, please go to the waiting room?
We were there the entire time. There was Marissa at Lawnwood. She is the director of their pediatric department. She was in that operating room with us, and she kept us updated on everything that they were doing. So once we got into that room, they told us that Lincoln was having a hard time breathing on his own, and that he needed to be intubated. So they intubated him. And at that point, they had gotten lab results back. So they're like, okay, like, this baby is sick. We need to take some measures here. So he was intubated. Me and his dad will never forget when he was intubated, the amount of blood that came out of his nose. It was just like, all of it was the worst possible sight. But after they intubated him, they put a central line in. The entire time we were there, they had to have somebody hold that central line against his neck so he didn't bleed out, basically. So we're being kept up to date. Marissa's checking in with us, and then the doctor comes over to us and is like, I don't think your baby's going to make it. And I'm like, what? Like, I knew this was bad, but what? So, I had to step out of the room. I called my family. The amount of guilt I felt stepping out of that room for those 2 minutes was awful. And I already felt so helpless, not being able to do anything, and like having to watch all these people take care of my baby. I feel like, I don't know, it starts to make you question the things that you you've done, like did I do something wrong in the last week that could have caused this? Trying to replay all of this stuff while I'm watching this room filled with people taking turns doing whatever they can to get Lincoln stable. And then we ended up being admitted to the PICU. Hats off to them. They are some incredible people. One of the nurses, Kim, she worked on Lincoln, I would say the most. She was incredible. She supported me. She took care of Lincoln. The team was just remarkable. We had the worst possible result, but their team was incredible. We're in the PICU room, and there's still, at this point he had been put on a vent. And they had sedated him because he was fighting. He was trying to breathe over the vent, but they, didn't want that to exasperate him. So they had sedated him. He was having blood transfusions. He was getting he was hooked up to all kinds of machines, getting all types of medicine, trying to get his heart going quicker, to get him out of crazy antibiotics, because at that point he was septic. And sorry, I'm just gonna catch up for a second.
Take whatever you need.
Yeah. He's hooked up to all of these machines, and we're just watching all of this stuff happen. Our families are in the waiting room. His dad went out and talked to our families. I stayed in the room as long as I could. I did end up going out and talking to my family, but again, like that, I just had this guilt. His dad was in there, but I still felt like I was leaving him alone. It was just something deep inside of me. I don't know. I knew he was in there with his dad, but I just, I knew this awful thing was going on, and that I was taking a step away from it for a second made me feel very guilty. But after I had came back from talking with our families, they were, telling us a little bit about what was going on. His vitals were very poor, and this infection is taking over his whole body. At this point, his lungs were starting to fill up with blood. And the doctor that we had was excellent. He was kept us informed as well. But then he was he contacted Nicklaus Hospital in Miami. At first, they thought that it could have been a metabolic issue. There's a disorder with enzymes in your metabolism that if you're not born with the proper enzymes, you can't break down food. So the more you eat or the more you feed, the sicker they get. So at first, that's what they thought the issue was. So they called Nicklaus, the doctor in Miami. They had a helicopter waiting for us. They originally said that they would let his dad fly with him because he was light enough. But then they came back to us and said, if he's stable enough to go, he's going, you guys aren't going with him, he'll have a companion. And our minds were no, no, you're telling us how sick our baby is and that we have to get his vitals stable now. What happens when he gets on the helicopter? He's not with us, and then we're on a 3.5-hour drive down to Miami. No way. But by that point, unfortunately, it was a little bit too late. His vitals weren't where they were supposed to be. There were some points where he would fight and things would look a little bit normal. There was a point where the doctor came into us and was I think he might have a chance. So then we're okay. That added the up and down of the situation as well. Any little bit of hope that you can hear in those moments is, sucks that you get knocked down quite a bit, but Lincoln was in the cradle, and, things were just, I don't know, declining, seemed like they were okay, declining. And so it was an up and down thing. He was fighting, that's for sure. But at one point, I can't remember at what point it was, but they asked me if I wanted to hold Lincoln. And when they asked me that, I knew that that was going to be the last time I held my baby alive. He was attached to all of these machines, all of these wires, and they pulled a rocking chair over to the side of the bassinet, crib, whatever they're called. And they picked him up and they handed him to me. And I mean, I know he was sedated, but he was just like limp, and all I could do was cry over him and tell him how much I love him, and he's so loved, and, no matter what, everything's going to be okay. And, we're going to get through this. Even though something in me knew that we weren't, I was like reassurance for myself also, trying to keep myself in check. But as I was holding Lincoln in that rocking chair, his vitals started to plummet, and they ended up calling their first code blue on him, and they took him out of my hands and threw the CPR board underneath him. When they had asked us if we wanted to stay in the room for it or not, some people choose not to because it's a very, very traumatic situation. Originally, we had thought we didn't want to be in there for it, but then both of us, me and his dad, were like, absolutely not. Like, he needs us there. Like, we're his parents. We need to be there. And then once it all happened, it was like, we wouldn't have had it any other way. Like, there's no way. But watching all of that happen, that whole code blue, it felt like there was 50 people in that room. At the code teams, the whole hospital responds. There's certain roles for the codes, and everybody that has a role in it is called, and they show up. And as chaotic as a situation like that is, their movements were so calculated, and they knew what they were doing. This person was here and this person was here, and okay, I need to switch out. It was awful to watch, but the way that they handled themselves, and they worked so hard. After that first code, they were able to resuscitate him. So now we're still doing blood transfusions. We're still getting antibiotics. We're still vented. But now at this point, his lungs are getting too filled with blood, and he's not able to exchange his CO2. We're basically waiting for him to drown in his own blood. Sorry to be graphic about that, but that was what I felt like when I was in there. And watching them suction his lungs was just I can't even believe that amount of fluid could come out of a small human, So they had to do, I don't know, they came in to do an X-ray or some kind of scan. I don't know if it was a CT scan or an X-ray. When they came in to do that ended up being another code. So we had 2 code blues called on Lincoln. Everybody came back, and, everybody was doing what they needed to do. Again, chaos is just like ensuing around us. The most organized chaos ever. It was the worst possible thing to watch. Feeling helpless and, like a little hopeless, knowing that you're watching your baby pass away, So, we're watching his vitals plummet, and they're doing CPR, and they're doing everything. And they had been trying to resuscitate him for probably about 20 minutes at that point. And the doctor came to us and was like, look, like, what do you want to do? And we're like, what do you mean? What do you want us to do? Like, save our baby. That's what we want you to do. And he's like, okay, we'll keep going. We'll keep going. And shortly after that, they came in and they checked, the doctor listened to his heart, and he came over to us and he was like, again, we can do this all night if you want us to. But his heart is no longer pumping blood through his body. His heart is